Remember when Chevrolet cars were proudly built right here in America during the 1950s? It felt like Chevy was destined to rule the roads forever. Join us for a nostalgic journey back to the golden age of American car manufacturing, right inside the factories that built a legacy. Right now you're looking inside the St. Louis factory as it was in 1955. It was owned by General Motors and produced Chevrolet vehicles. At its peak, the plant employed 35,000 workers and rolled out 560 vehicles per day. In total, 6.3 million vehicles were built at the St. Louis Truck Assembly plant. The plant closed in 1986. Its future essentially sealed when General Motors closed the Caprice and Impala assembly on 1980. Many consider these times the golden age of the automobile, a period filled with unmatched innovation and style. Share your thoughts in the comments below. This is the General Motors Norwood Assembly plant in 1960. In the 1960s, the Chevrolet Bel Air was produced here, as well as the flagship Chevrolet model called the Impala. Back in the old days, when people were still a valuable part of the manufacturing process, it was a time when people took pride in their work and pride in every car they made. Right now, you're watching the production 4.6-liter V8 turbo fire engine. These Chevrolets consisted of 14,000 parts. Today, modern cars have an average of over 30,000 parts. This comparison shows how much more complex cars have become over the decades. Over 9,000 employees worked at this Norwood assembly plant in Ohio. Production began here in 1923 and closed completely in 1987. This General Motors plant also produced the Chevrolet Biscayne, Caprice, Camaro, Pontiac Firebird, and Buick Apollo. At the time of this film, Chevrolet was producing more than 1.6 million cars a year and offered a wide range of colors and trims. In those days, General Motors was the largest car company in the world. GM included Buick, Cadillac, Pontiac, and Oldsmobile. For the full-size Chevrolet alone, there were 5 engines, 5 transmissions, 7 body styles and 3 trim levels, 14 exterior colors, dozens of interior fabrics, and an almost endless list of luxury and performance options. This machine automatically checked dimensions to within 10,000ths of an inch. Pieces that were deliberately too small were also inserted into the machine to test its efficiency. This is a good illustration of how much automobile factories have moved on. The Impala, whose production you're watching right now, was Chevrolet's popular flagship and one of the best-selling American-made cars in the United States. Well, not anymore. Today, it is the best-selling Ford F-Series. Now the completed bodywork has moved on to the paintwork. Note that back then, the painters spraying the paint didn't have protective masks. This is called the marriage. In car manufacturing jargon, the marriage is the moment when the body and chassis are joined together. It's called this because the engine, gearbox, drive shafts and axles, fuel tank, and various other elements aren't fitted onto the car individually, but all at once. The assembly line was all about timing and teamwork, as well as organization. Today it's similar, but robotics play a big role, and the production process is all computer controlled. The wheels were mounted on the chassis before the body was joined to the chassis. In the 1960s, there were thousands of different color combinations to choose from. Today, car companies usually offer only a few color combinations. The reason for this is, of course, lower production costs. There were many more workers on the main production line then than today. These Chevrolet cars were assembled from individual parts from subcontractors. The whole assembly process was like a giant jigsaw puzzle, piece by piece to the finished car. Even back then, Women worked in car factories in the United States. However, this was only 10% of the total workforce compared to 25% today. After the first run, the finished Chevrolet Impala was taken to the test dyno. Here, engine performance and control were tested from the driver's seat. Now the quality inspector has taken the finished Chevrolet for waterproofing testing. A heavy shower was turned on the car, and not a drop of water was allowed to enter the interior of the car. Who wouldn't want to have this yellow pickup truck in their garage? At the end of the quality control, the car is marked with a Test Pass sticker. This dealer also always checked the quality of the car offered, and always polished and scented the car after delivery to the dealership. This is how the workers took a relaxing break. The facility had a number of labor disputes, including a 174-day-long strike in 1972, at the time the longest strike in GM history. As a result of the strike, 1,100 partially completed cars were scrapped or otherwise disposed of because it was not economically feasible to update them. The Michigan truck plant's motto is first in quality and first in pride. Now you're watching the production of not only the Ford Bronco, but also the Ford F-150 light truck at Michigan Truck Plant Wayne. From 1987 until 1991, the fourth generation Ford Bronco was produced here. There were 54,000 of these cars built in 1990. At the same time, the eighth generation Ford F-150 was being built here. Here, the car body is lowered onto the chassis with the finished engine. These Michigan factory employees were responsible for attaching the hood, windows, and finishing the entire interior of the car. Bonding of chrome emblems and logos, including polishing, was carried out at the end of the assembly line. This senior factory worker with gray hair signed off on the output quality control. He guaranteed the quality of the cars. It took decades to get to this high position inside this factory. Now these Ford Bronco and Ford F-150 cars could begin serving American drivers. In 1995, the most Ford Broncos were produced. A total of 37,600 cars were produced that year. Ford Bronco was not produced between 1996 and 2021. The sixth generation is in production from 2021. This is marriage. It's the moment when the mechanical elements of the car, engine, gearbox, drive shafts, axles are fitted to the car's body all at once. The seats were assembled in 1995 using this manipulator arm. At the same time, work is being done on the chassis, wiring and bolting components from the bottom of the car. The entire front bumper was easily assembled like in today's car factories. For 1994, the Bronco became powered solely by V8 engines, as the 4.9-liter inline-six was withdrawn from the model line. This is how the quality control was carried out at the end of the main assembly line. The 1977 first-generation Ford Bronco has proven to be the most reliable model so far. Built upon a sturdy frame and outfitted with heavy-duty components, it exudes durability in every aspect of its design. This is how Ford production was done in the 1990s inside the Michigan assembly plant. Ford Bronco of this era was for many people the most dependable vehicle they have ever owned. You are now watching the welding and completion of the car bodywork in 1990. The Ford Bronco was produced here from 1966 to 1996. Sealant was applied to the body parts and then dipped into the tank with an anti-corrosion coating. Now the bodywork has been transported for painting. Even then, more than 30 years ago, the paint was sprayed automatically. In 1990, more than 33,000 Ford Broncos were produced here. So now you are watching the production of the 5th generation Ford Bronco. It was discontinued in 1996 and replaced by the Ford Expedition in 1997. According to Ford, the discontinuation of this model line was not related to the stigma caused by the recent police chase with O.J. Simpson, because sales of this model line were already declining prior to that incident. You are now watching the production process on the main assembly line. Here, these workers assemble the front dashboard, connect the wiring, attach the wheels, and much more. Strong adhesive is applied to the front window, and 2 factory workers attach the window to the frame. At the same time, a chassis is being worked on in another part of the factory. The engine is assembled on a separate assembly line. The finished engine is then moved to the main assembly line and mounted to the chassis frame at a predetermined time. Most employees wore safety goggles, gloves, and usually also protective overalls at work. The 5th generation Bronco carried over the previous 4.9-liter, inline-6 5.0-liter V8 and the 5.8-liter V8 engines from the previous generation. After joining the body with the chassis and engine, the main assembly line continued. The demand for Ford Bronco vehicles has been slowly growing in recent years, which is why this model is currently thriving. The lights were plugged in, the bumpers were attached, and then the car was moved to the dyno. Here, the engine performance was tested. The correct function of the gearbox and the lights were adjusted. But now you are looking at the quality control process inside the German factory, where the Trabant was made. This famous little car from East Germany was produced from 1957 to 1990 in an almost unchanged version. Almost 4 million of these cars were produced. During quality control, these workers adjusted the doors, wheels, and bonnet mainly by their own efforts and with the help of a hammer. In the United States, final quality control was often carried out in a similar way. However, this made it easy to repair cars from the 70s on your own. This is the production process inside the Volkswagen factory near Emden. This is what the assembly of the popular Volkswagen Beetle looked like in 1974. A staggering 6,800 Beetle cars were produced here every day. Officially, these cars were sold only in West Germany and other Western European countries. However, the border between East and West Germany was not very strict before 1961. Volkswagen Beetle was built since the 1950s, and even after 1961, there might have been some people who brought one of these cars to East Germany. Volkswagen's share of all cars produced in West Germany reached 49% in the 1970s. In 1968, the Type 1 was officially given the name Beetle from Der Käfer, German for beetle. Between 1940 and the end of production in 2003, an incredible 23 million Volkswagen Beetles were produced. The port of Emden is the most important port complex of the Volkswagen Group. It is Europe's third largest car distribution port and a key center for the import and export of new cars. Right now you can see the bodywork of a 1970s Volkswagen Beetle being assembled. This factory worker carried out quality control according to a set checklist, similar to today's car factories. The marriage is the stage of connecting the chassis and engine to the car body. Today, the Volkswagen plant in Emden produces the ID4, ID7, and ID7 Tourer models. This is how the Volkswagen Beetle seats and wheels were assembled in Germany. One of the most iconic cars in automotive history, the Beetle is noted for its distinctive shape. Now the cars have been started for the first time and taken to the dyno test line. Here, the engine power and correct speed settings were checked. Volkswagen Beetle cars were offered in a wide range of colors and equipment, plus many upgrades. The Volkswagen Embed factory was founded in 1964 and employs around 8,000 workers. Let's take a look at how the car performs in the individual tables. The Volkswagen Beetle doesn't have a very good reliability history. According to various surveys, the Beetle scored 44.8 points in reliability, which puts it at the lower end of the scale. It's also one of Volkswagen's lesser performing cars. This is how Volkswagen Beetle production always started, in a department called the Pest Shop. After its discontinuation in Germany, production of the Volkswagen Beetle continued in Australia, Mexico, and Nigeria. Now you are watching authentic historical footage of the Volkswagen Beetle being built in a factory in Mexico. Now the entire body of the car has been dipped in an anti-corrosion solution. Different car configurations and colors meet on the same assembly line. According to the attached birth certificate of each car, you know what equipment it should have. In the case of the Beetle, the engine is inserted from below into the chassis frame. In 2003, the bodywork was already being painted by robotic hands. Volkswagen's old classic car logo has been stuck on the Beetle's bonnet. Production of the Volkswagen Beetle began at this Puebla plant in Mexico in July 2003. Its production span of 65 years is the longest of any single generation of automobile, and its total production of over 23 million is the most of any car of a single platform. To celebrate the occasion, Volkswagen marketed a series of 3,000 Beetles as Ultima Edición, Final Edition. Once production is complete, the cars are loaded onto a huge ferry and shipped to markets around the world. The local market referred to the Beetle as the Vocho. While the design of the Beetle changed little over its lifespan, Volkswagen implemented over 78,000 incremental updates. Typically subtle, these alterations usually involved minor updates to the exterior, interior, colors, and lighting. Other notable changes involved new engines, models, and systems, such as updated dashboards and hydraulic brakes. Volkswagen Beetle, officially the Volkswagen Type 1, is a small family car produced by the German company Volkswagen from 1938 to 2003. During its 65 years of production, Volkswagen produced the Type 1 in many locations around the world. Production of the Beetle was possible through agreements with companies like Chrysler in Mexico and the Studebaker-Packard Corporation, which assembled cars imported in complete knockdown form. The Beetle was introduced to the Mexican market in 1954 and began official production 10 years later. The introduction of a new taxi regulation in Mexico City, requiring only four-door vehicles to be permitted to prevent robberies, influenced Volkswagen's decision to the end of the production of the Beetle in 2003. In the US, the Beetle became popular thanks to a great advertising campaign called Think Small. Today, that final Beetle can be seen at Volkswagen's Auto Museum in Wolfsburg, Germany, where it remains on display. It was a small family car with a rear engine designed by Ferdinand Porsche. Please write me an opinion on the Volkswagen Beetle in the comments section. The production process of Trabant started here, like in the press shop. VEB Sachsenring was founded in 1957 and employed approximately 3,000 people. Sachsenring was one of the few manufacturers of vehicles in East Germany, its best-known product being the Trabant, produced between 1957 and 1991. The employees in the Zwickau factory were mostly East Germans. However, other nationalities also worked there. Especially the chassis of the Trabant was hand-welded. Today, robots do this work. The most famous was the Trabant 601, whose production you are watching right now, which was produced from 1964 to 1990. It featured detachable Duroplast body panels on a galvanized steel unibody chassis, front-wheel drive, a transverse two-stroke engine, and independent suspension. quite revolutionary was the all-in-front concept. The transversely mounted engine was in front of the front axle, which it drove. Trabants may have been small, but they were quite demanding to produce. Approximately 33,000 Trabants are still on the streets of Germany today. Over the 27 years of 601 Trabants, many subversions have been created. The 1980s model had no speedometer, headlight or turn signal indicator, fuel gauge, rear seat belts, or exterior fuel tank door. Earlier models had no fuel gauge, and a dipstick was inserted into the tank to determine how much fuel remained. The Trabant excelled in its ability to pollute the environment. The exhaust fumes were terrible. Although Trabant production was relatively large, it was unable to meet the demand of the population. Each car was equipped with a checklist where employees recorded the assembly performed. Thousands of East Germans drove their Trabants over the border when the wall fell, which made it a kind of automotive liberator. The Trabant had a steel frame with the roof, boot lid, bonnet, wings, and doors made of Duroplast. Trabant is made of Duroplast, which is a composite thermosetting resin plastic. Women also worked in the Zwickau factory, but only about 15% of all factory workers. Working conditions in the Zwickau factories were very bad and unhealthy. The material was durable, and the average lifespan of a Trabant was 28 years. The Trabants, which are called spark plugs with a roof, have produced 3 million units to date. The cars are often referred to as Trabi or Trabi. Manufactured by a state monopoly, a Trabant took about 10 years to acquire. These factory workers worked as fast as they could, even so they were unable to meet the demand for these cars. The Trabant's build quality was poor, and it was loud, slow, and poorly designed. Older models have been sought by collectors in the United States due to their low cost and fewer restrictions on the importation of antique cars. You are now watching the finishing and polishing of the Trabant 601 bodywork. Because the Trabant had no fuel pump, its fuel tank was above the motor so fuel could reach the carburetor by gravity. This increased the risk of fire in front-end accidents. In 1989, a total of over 150,000 Trabants were produced in a single year. Its curb weight was about 1,323 pounds. When it ceased production in 1989, the Trabant delivered 19 kilowatts. Its inefficient, labor-intensive production line had only survived thanks to government subsidies. Trabant P601 also had an overrunning clutch when running in fourth gear. Also in the production of Trabants, quality control was carried out during the production process. The new line at the Zwickau factory was able to paint the bodywork using these hand-spraying robots at the end of the 1980s. The Zwickau factory in Mosel, where the Trabant was manufactured, was sold to Volkswagen. The rest of the company became Sachsen-Ring. The car was to be larger. The base was not to be a limousine, but a hatchback, and more powerful engines were to be used. However, the development of both the Trabant 602 and the Trabant 603 was eventually halted due to instructions from the management. In order to allow the automaker's employees to assemble the lower parts of the car well, the car rotated on its axis. The body of the Trabant is now placed on the finished chassis using a crane. This process is to this day called and referred to as the marriage. Volkswagen redeveloped the Zwickau factory into a center for engine production. It also produces some Volkswagen Golf and Passat. Zwickau opted for a Duroplast body mainly because East Germany was facing a steel shortage in the 1950s. In comparative crash tests in the early 1990s, on the other hand, it fared better than some metal-bodied cars. It was the second car with a body made of recycled material. The first was the Zwickau, produced from 1955 to 1959. Since the engine was two-stroke, oil had to be added to the 24-liter ratio of fuel to oil at each fill-up. Now the bodywork is being sealed in preparation for the anti-corrosion bath. You are now watching the entire bodywork being dipped in corrosion protection. Its greatest drawback was its largely unchanged production. The car's two-stroke engine made it obsolete by the 1970s, limiting exports to Western Europe. There was no place for the Trabant in a reunified German economy. Its inefficient, labor-intensive production line had only survived thanks to government subsidies. The Duroplast parts were glued to the sheet metal frame, and these were ground and cut out. As you can see right now, the workers in this factory wore ordinary clothes like at home. There was no mandatory dress code. The concept of assembly line conveyor belt production has been similar since Henry Ford invented it. The Trabant had a steel frame with the roof, boot lid, bonnet, wings, and doors made of Duroplast, a hard plastic made from recycled cotton waste from the Soviet Union, and phenol resins from the East German dye industry. The Trabant P50 was produced from 1957 to 1962. The Trabant 600 was produced from 1962 to 1965, and the Trabant 1.1 was produced from 1990 to 1991. The basic type was a two-door limousine. The alternative was a three-door coupe. In richer equipment versions, the cars were enriched with fog lights or a speedometer. The concept of the hatchback was further developed by the chief designer in the Trabant 603 prototype, which is sometimes regarded as a prototype for Volkswagen. The wheels of the Trabant were fixed on 4 classic screws, nothing complicated. When a successor, the Trabant 1.1, was eventually developed, it received minimal external differences. The waiting time depended on their proximity to Berlin, the capital. The second-hand price on the open market was more than double that. Trabant car bodies moved across the factory on sliding rails, much like in today's factories. In addition, from 1966, an off-road version without doors and with a canvas roof was produced for the East German Armed Forces. Following the reunification of Germany in 1990, Sachsenring transitioned from a government-owned company under a centrally planned economy to a private corporation in a free market economy. In order to allow the automaker's employees to assemble the lower parts of the car well, the car rotated on its axis. Known for its dull color scheme and cramped, uncomfortable ride, the Trabant is an object of ridicule for many Germans and is regarded as symbolic of the fall of the Eastern Bloc. After completion, the new cars were loaded onto trains or trucks and shipped throughout the communist countries. Employees at the Zwickau factory load hundreds of Trabant cars onto trains every day. It took 21 seconds to accelerate from 0 to its top speed of 100 kilometers per hour, which is 62 miles per hour. This is the Wartburg factory in East Germany. You will see the production process from the beginning. At the end will be this finished Wartburg car. This factory was located near the German town of Eisenach since 1898. Production ended on April 1991, and the factory was acquired by Opel. The first model, Wartburg 311, was produced between 1956 and 1965. Exports to West Germany began in 1958, and by the early 1960s, the car was exported to other countries, including the United Kingdom and United States. Tailgate and rear fenders were made of glass fiber reinforced plastic. The Wartburg 353, Known in some export markets as the Wartburg Knight, is a medium-sized family car. The last modernization of Wartburg took place in 1988 when the car got the new designation 1.3 and a 4-stroke Volkswagen-designed engine with a 1.3-liter displacement. The Wartburg 353 was produced from 1966 to 1988, becoming the Wartburg with the longest production run. During its lifetime, it saw several changes and improvements, the most recognizable of which came in 1985 with a front facelift, a slightly different layout around the engine block, and a new carburetor. Now the new cars have been tested on the dyno. This is how the engine performance was tested. Domestically, it was used for all government transportation, sometimes as a Volkspolizei police car. However, due to the nature of the planned economy, deliveries to private owners could take 10 to 15 years.